Projects are an important part of school. Projects are much more different than other assignments, as they require much more effort and engagement than most other assignments. Because of this, students tend to be more proud of their projects than the regular assignments, or at least that's how it is for me. Today, I'm going to talk about my proudest school projects. I'm Zach, and this is Storytime 17 on April 23rd, 2021. So I will be discussing 22 projects from 7th grade to 11th grade. So to organize the video as much as possible, I'll be doing two backstories, one for middle school and one for high school. These projects will be discussed chronologically, so you won't see me jumping from like 11th grade to 9th grade as an example. I also won't be discussing projects from before 7th grade. While I'd love to talk about the pre-middle school projects, I really don't have much to talk about, as no projects from elementary or intermediate school really stick out. Anyways, on to the backstory from middle school. So middle school was a chaotic time for me. 8th grade especially was really chaotic, mostly because I struggled with depression during 8th grade. 7th grade though was much better, and overall I did really well then. 7th grade in particular was a great school year, as we discussed last week. Or not last, 2 weeks ago. But 7th grade also has more projects than in 8th grade. I had 5 total projects from middle school that I want to share with y'all. 3 are from 7th grade, 2 are from 8th grade. Anyways, on to the first project. So the first project from 7th grade was for computer skills and application. In this class, we did a module on proofreader marks. Our project was to put all the proofreader marks onto a poster with drawings and other stuff like that. For my project, I chose the medieval theme. I drew a castle as well as knights trying to enter the castle. Obviously, all the proofreader marks were hidden throughout the drawings. I'm bad at art, but I thought I created something really good. My teacher seemed to agree, and she gave me 100. Overall, this was a great project that I think I did really well on, and shows how you should not be skeptical about projects. This lesson would also help me a lot in American history in 11th grade, but more on that later. Now, the second project from 7th grade I want to mention is a project for science. While it's not really a project, it was actually extra credit, but I'll still consider it a project since it basically was a project. Anyways, for extra credit, our teacher told us we could bake a cake with multiple toppings to represent the organelles of a cell. We could choose if the cake would be a plant or animal cell. I made a plant cell cake. It was a rectangular cake. It had Twizzlers as a border on the cake to represent the cell wall, which is only found on plant cells. We then would bring our cakes into class on one Friday, where we would show off our cakes and then the whole class got to have a slice. It was really fun getting to see everyone's cake. Surprisingly, a lot of people actually baked cakes. So we had a feast. I barely could even eat lunch because of how much cake I had. I got the extra credit, and overall it was great. I also remember in particular that a lot of students in our class said they wanted mine especially, mostly because I had Twizzlers on mine. Can't blame them, Twizzlers are great. Now let's move on to the last project I want to mention for 7th grade. It was for technology and innovation. So in technology, we discussed the 5 types of technology. We then had to create a presentation with 5 others about the 5 types of technology. I kind of played the role as the leader of the group. I made sure everything was great and made sure everything worked properly. I also made sure all the animations worked. In the end, it was successful. We only made a 95 on it, but it was still a success. That's all I really remember from it, as this project was more on the lesser memorable project side of the most memorable. I do remember that Thursday night before we had to present, spending a lot of time on it and actually enjoying it as well. So now let's discuss the first 2 projects from 8th grade. The first one I want to talk about was for science. So in science, we were discussing pathogens. Our project was that with a partner, we had to create a presentation on a disease of our choice. I worked with Ryan on it. Me and Ryan are really good friends, by the way. He participates in my streams, and we chose to do our presentation on the bubonic plague. We talked about the symptoms as well as, of course, the pandemic between 1347 to 1353. We, of course, then did a presentation in front of the class. I think literally everyone in the class loved both me and Ryan. So you bet that everyone liked this presentation. It was successful. I believe we made 100 on it. Now for the final project from 8th grade. So this project was for art. Now, it really wasn't a project for school. Rather, our teacher just said do whatever the hell you want. So I decided to make a 3-foot-long equilateral triangle Dorito. I did it, but not just that, but I also did it with a broken arm too. I made this Dorito out of a ton of newspaper scraps. It took a ton of newspaper and a lot of work, but after a couple weeks, I finished it. I like to remember this project for really demonstrating how to overcome challenges, as I did this with only one arm since my left arm was in a splint. However, my mom thinks differently. You see, my mom, for whatever reason, does not like this Dorito. In fact, she's been trying to throw it away for 3 years now, but every single time she fails. Although I think she's given up, as she knows I won't let her throw it away because I just love that Dorito so much. So that's all the projects from middle school that I want to mention. Of course, there are more projects from middle school, but these are the most memorable and my proudest projects. Now let's discuss high school. So I'm discussing far more projects in high school than in middle school. Why is that? Well, it's because of the school I go to. So I go to an early college high school, where I get both a high school diploma and an associate's degree when I graduate high school. Our school follows the expeditionary learning curriculum. Basically, this means we focus more on physical learning rather than sitting in a classroom all day. I think this is a great concept, and I wish more schools did this. In this special curriculum, we do a class called seminar, and we often do special projects called intensives. Seminar is the class to work on intensives. Intensives are the projects that relate to the expeditionary learning. Therefore, our assignments at school are much more project focused. That is why I have like 3 times more projects to talk about here than in middle school. So the first project for high school, obviously it took place in 9th grade, of course, and it was for seminar. So in early October of 2018, we did a tour around the city, and our teachers pointed to different historical sites throughout the city, such as houses, fairgrounds, carousels, and more. We also had to take notes on each of the things we mentioned. After the tour, we were given our assignment to create a trifold poster on some of the things mentioned. We were also put in groups. I won't mention what exactly our group did, as it was of a famous person from our city. However, around mid-November, right before Thanksgiving break, we did have to present these to our parents at our student-led conference. So basically, student-led conferences, or SLCs, are things my school does in which you have to basically have an SLC binder full of work that you did throughout the school year and you show to your parents. These were for every freshman and sophomore, and we did 2 each year. I only did 3 as I couldn't do the final one in sophomore year because of coronavirus. However, we had to present our trifold to our parents at our SLC. It went really well. My mom was really impressed, so were the other parents. We didn't get a numerical grade, as seminar is simply a pass or fail course, so instead, we just passed. Now for the second project from 9th grade. This was a research paper I did for community health, one of my college courses I took my first semester of freshman year. So for this paper, we had to write about any public health issue. I chose to write about alcohol addiction among minors. I wrote it and I thought it was a great paper. I thought it flowed pretty easily and I did a good job, so I let my mom look at it. However, she was not impressed. She said that it was pretty bad and claimed that I was probably going to make a 70 on it. But fortunately, my professor decided to side with me, as she gave me a 99.997 on it. Yeah, I told my mom this, and she was absolutely flabbergasted. I literally had to pull up the grades just so that she would believe me. Even my mom had a hard time believing me even after that. But it was true, my paper was actually really good. And you know what's so funny? I never took a single bit of advice from mom. So yeah, I kicked mom's ass on this one. I believe I missed like 0.003 points because of an error on an in-text citation. But other than that, the paper was great. Now let's discuss probably my favorite project from 9th grade. It was for Algebra 2, so we were discussing cubic and quartic functions in class. So our project revolved around us creating a poster and creating a polynomial revolving around our birthday. This project was called the birthday polynomial. We basically included some information on it, such as our birthday and other stuff. My birthday is June 21st, 2004, so I decided to use 512x to the power of 4 minus 1664x to the power of 3 plus 328x squared plus 164x plus 12. Of course, this is an extremely complicated equation, but its factored form is only 2x minus 6 times 4x minus 2 times 8x plus 1 squared. I'm not exactly sure how I got many of these numbers except 2 and 8, as I mentioned those are my favorite numbers, but nonetheless, the poster was very neat and it had all the correct information and was very vibrant in terms of color. My math teacher also helped me out with this. The reason he did this was because normally I don't spend lunch during doing schoolwork. However, I decided that instead of doing lunch, that I would work on this as I was just so engaged with this project. My teacher knew that, yeah, I'm serious about this project. She helped me in every way possible to succeed. And I did. I made 100 on it. And in case you're wondering just how much I love this project, just know that it's actually hung up in the wall, and the note my math teacher attached to it is still there. Yeah, I'm very proud of this project. It probably will be for a very long time. And also a really good memory about my math teacher too, as last year he actually retired, so it's definitely a really cool memory to have. The next project from 9th grade I want to mention was for English. While you might not consider it a project, I do. My teacher put it in as a project grade, so that's why I'm going to call it a project. So this was a class discussion. Our teachers do these a lot, because remember, we're an expeditionary learning school. But this discussion in particular was different. It was basically a Knights at the Round Table discussion, where the whole class would circle up and discuss questions. So this discussion was on Romeo and Juliet, which is what we just finished reading as a class. So for this, we were given the questions beforehand, and we had to answer all of them on paper. But then we had a class discussion where each student had to speak like 4 times in order to receive 100. Now, what's so significant about this project was my relationship with my teacher at the time. So me and my freshman English teacher did not get along very well. We had arguments about every other day, mostly because I just refused to get my shit together until around April of 2019. However, this project is what turned our relationship a full 180. So I had a 77 in the class at the time. Since I was in a pickle, I took this project really seriously. We only had to speak like 4 times to make 100. I think I spoke a total of like 8 times. In fact, that was so much that my teacher literally had to pass a note telling me to stop talking in order to give others a chance. Needless to say that her attitude towards me changed, as now she knew that I changed and wanted to be successful. So therefore, her class became much more manageable, but I still didn't respect her that much. That attitude would change at the second SLC of freshman year. So after we finished the SLC, me and my mom were heading out, and until my English teacher spotted us. She didn't talk to my mom. I remember her telling my mom that I was such a great student and did extremely well in the discussion. Yeah, my respect for her shot through the roof after she told this to my mom. It's one thing to tell me I'm good, but to say that to someone else, especially my mom, yeah, you bet my respect for her shot through the roof. Needless to say, Mom was really impressed by these comments as well. So yeah, this project was extremely significant, not because of the project itself, but it also single-handedly made me really like a teacher I hated. What's so cool is that I actually have her right now for American Lit. So yeah, you bet fixing our relationship as a rising sophomore benefited me as a junior now. So now the final project I want to mention from 9th grade. This was our semester project for Introduction to Film, a college class. So throughout this class, we learned how to make reviews on movies. What makes a good movie? That bullshit. It's not a class I recommend, as I personally didn't enjoy it, mostly because I am simply not a movie person. But anyways, our semester project was worth 30% of our grade for this class. Lord have mercy, that's a lot. What's worse is that it was on a very in-depth film review of a top 100 film of the 20th century. The highest grade I made on a film review so far in the year was a 77. Oh shit. My assigned film was Titanic, by the way. Anyways, when I say this was a big-ass film review, I mean this was a big-ass film review. It had to be between 10 to 21 pages. At the time, I wasn't used to writing stuff like this, so you bet I was scared as hell. We were, however, given the entire semester to do this, as it was basically due 2 years today, on April 23rd, 2019. However, I ended up doing it and turning it in on April 22nd, 2019. Yeah, I did it at almost the last minute. It was 11 pages long. I honestly thought it was pretty bad, as it was, after all, done last minute, and my highest grade on a film review was a 77. However, to my surprise, I broke my record. I ended up getting an 87 on it. I was really surprised by this grade. I didn't think it was worth a B+, but turns out my professor thought differently. So I was really thankful to see this. Now let's move on to 10th grade, the first project I want to talk about. So this was for seminar, as it is an intensive, much like the one in freshman year when we toured around the city, but for this intensive, we actually went on a 3-day trip. I explained it in my Storytime on intensives, so if you want to hear all about that, then watch Storytime 6. Anyways, one activity in particular we did was that we were at a research center. While there, we looked out the balcony. We were ordered to write down how we felt as well as draw what we saw. So we did that and didn't really think much of it. But the next week, we were in seminar and our teacher announced what we were doing. We were going to write a found poem on what we saw, and what we were also going to have to draw illustrations on the background. All of this on a poster. Now, I've already read my poem in Storytime 5 and 6, but I'll just read it out again since I might as well. I see the natural world filled with numerous trees, waving with the sound of the wind, and the birds chirping to the melodious tone. What beautiful and peaceful song nature offers to greet hikers hiking the trail, so that they might hear the melody of the beautiful natural world. This poem obviously was pretty shitty, but it did the job, and I passed the project. But what I remember most from this would be my teacher hanging it up on the wall. So sometime in November of 2019, he hung up our posters on the wall. However, for mine, he ended up hanging it upside down. How? There are literally words on it. There are trees. How do you put that upside down? Oh well, he's going to screw up even more later on that school year, which I'll talk about that. Now, for the next project in 10th grade I want to mention was for crew. I actually did an entire story time on crew for Storytime 11, so check that out if you have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. Anyways, each year crew has to make a crew flag that represents their crew. So I never did much in crew, however, I remember this project because I did a lot for it. While this was supposed to be for the entire crew, it was really only the sophomores who worked on it. There were 4 sophomores in this crew that year, pretty glaring that I was a sophomore, so I did a lot. Our flag was of a night sky with the moon and stars and other stuff. We represented all the freshmen and juniors as bugs and the sophomores as stars to poke fun at the rest of the crew. We also, of course, drew a compass and wrote "Find Your True North" on it, as that's our crew's motto. It was a success, and I think overall, we sophomores killed it. For the next 10th grade project, I want to talk about English, or World Lit. So we finished reading the book called Night by Elie Wiesel. In case you didn't know, Elie Wiesel was a Holocaust survivor, and this book was a memoir of his experience in multiple concentration camps, including Auschwitz. So for this project, we had to create a poster revolving around a certain theme throughout the book. So the way our teacher assigned us our groups was pretty interesting. So she basically put all of the artistic people in the class all in different groups. She then got all the students who were good at math, and one math person was assigned to each group. I was, of course, the math person, as I want to be a math teacher when I grow up. She did this because we were going to have to draw charts and measure things. Then our teacher assigned the rest of the class to a group. I was assigned to a group with 4 girls. The best part about it was that all the girls had experience at art, and I suck at art. Therefore, all the girls did the artwork, and I gathered the information through the charts and did all the measurements. We were then given our theme, which for our group was sorrow. Overall, I thought our group did phenomenal. The girls created probably some of the best artwork I've ever seen for a school project, yet it was that good. I think I also did a good job with the information and the charts. However, we only received an 87 on it. How the hell was this masterpiece an 87? Well, our teacher graded this pretty strictly, and I have no idea why. But you know what's so funny? We actually made the highest grade in the entire grade. Yeah, she truly was very strict on it. But oh well, me and the girls were all still very satisfied with our work, but not just satisfied with our grade. For the next project in 10th grade, we're going to stay in World Lit. So we basically had just finished reading a book called All Quiet on the Western Front. It's basically a historical fiction book about a group of German soldiers in World War I. It's a required read for 10th grade in North Carolina, by the way. Anyways, unlike the previous project, we actually did this project alone. So for this project, we had to write a poem about a symbol mentioned in the book. Classic English class stuff. But then we had to print pictures and put on a piece of construction paper where the poem was. Overall, it was really simple and a very easy project. In fact, I'll also read out my poem because why not? Through these bullets and shell fire, I hide in the mud. A French soldier comes near me, so I stab and spew his blood. Grief compels me heavily. I stab the life out of him. I tried to bandage him up some, but he still looks grim. I see his pocketbook beside him. I see pictures of his wife and daughter. They will probably be in tears when they hear their man was slaughtered. I can't do much for them, because they probably wish I'd die, so I put some money in his pocketbook and say to his lifeless body, bye. This poem was of course a reference to the scene where Paul, the main character, killed a French soldier with a knife. The knife was a symbol for something, I forgot. Look, I'm not a future English teacher, I'm a future math teacher. I don't get the symbolism bullshit. Anyways, the poem was called The Death Striker for obvious reasons. I made 100 on it. I remember especially one day in study hall where me, Dylan, and Edward all worked on ours together. It was really fun. Now, for the next project for 10th grade, I want to talk about another project for seminar. It too was an intensive, just like the poem, but this time, we had to write a children's book. We had to write it on healthy choices, such as eating healthy, exercising, that shit. Then we would go to a local elementary school in early April to read to 2nd and 3rd graders. So we were paired up with a partner for this project. I was fortunate enough to be paired up with an artistic girl. She was not one of the girls who worked with me on the night poster, by the way. So the way we did this project was that I would be the author of the book, since I'm a good writer, and she would be the illustrator. Our teachers intended that both of us write it, and we both combine the two drives, and then we both work on the artwork, but considering I'm so bad at art and so good at writing, it was just a given that, yeah, I'm going to be the author. And of course, she was the exact opposite, as she was she was really good at art, and then she was not that good at writing. So it just made perfect sense that I was the author and she was the illustrator. So we did that. We made great progress throughout the month of January until a very serious situation occurred regarding our seminar teacher at the end of the month. So I've told this story twice so far in Storytime, but I'm going to mention it again because it was a major factor put into this project. So our seminar teacher got arrested for indecent liberties with a child. In case you don't know what this is, it's basically when an adult tries to send inappropriate pictures, videos, or other media to a minor, as well as talk inappropriately to a minor. In North Carolina, the sentence for this crime is generally about 1 to 2 years in prison, as it is a Class F felony. His victim was a 15-year-old boy. They exchanged nude photos on apps such as Grindr and Snapchat. The boy's father one day looked through his phone and saw these, and immediately contacted the police. The police, of course, came and arrested him. The boy did not go to our school, by the way. This incident spread like wildfire around school. Of course, as a result, we didn't have a seminar teacher anymore, and the students taking Algebra 2 with him didn't have a math teacher either. So therefore, we had a sub for like an entire month until an intern could come in. He was a retired math teacher who would teach for the rest of this year. Before he came in, we basically made no progress on our children's book. After he came in, we started making progress again. This teacher, though, was awesome, as he loved his job. He loved his job so much that now he was retired though, but he loved his job so much that he got out of retirement just so he could teach full time. So that had a happy ending to it. Now, the deadline for this book was coming up, as it was due in like late March, so we were kind of stressed out on that, and then we were going to have to read our books to kiddos in early April. Yeah, we were scared. However, we never read our children's book. In fact, we never even finished our books. The reason would be because around mid-March of 2020, the coronavirus pandemic began. We had to do school from home for the rest of the school year, making it impossible to read our books to the kids. Our principal announced that seminar would be waived for everyone as a result of the lockdowns. Therefore, we never finished the book. I remember this project a ton, mainly because of the situation regarding our seminar teacher. Now, let's backtrack a little to early March of 2020. The last project for 10th grade I want to mention, it was for crew. So for crew, we had to build a birdhouse. We were divided among two groups of freshmen, a group of sophomores, and a group of juniors. I glaringly was a part of the group of sophomores. So for the birdhouse, I used old wood from my old tree house I was tearing down. I also worked with my dad to build it one weekend. Now, we were definitely far behind on this, specifically like 3 weeks behind. Our teacher asked us every day at crew where our project was, and we would always have to say we didn't have it. I should note that my crew teacher was also my English teacher for freshman year, by the way. But one weekend in early March, me and my dad worked together and built the birdhouse. It looked really good. All we needed now was coloring, so that day I brought in the birdhouse. However, I decided to play a prank on my English teacher. So I had the birdhouse under the desk, and then she walked into the classroom. She didn't ask where our birdhouse was, and I said I didn't have it. This time though, she gets really furious. She then tries to tell us what we're going to do since we didn't have our birdhouse, but while she was yelling at us, I picked up the birdhouse and held it up. Her mood went from 100 all the way to 0 really quickly. She then sighed a big sigh of relief, and the whole class just started laughing. What's interesting about this is that very few students can really prank her, as most students have a pretty bad relationship with her. I'm one of the few students who can actually pull a prank on her and get away with it, so I used that to my advantage. It was really funny. So for the next 2 weeks, my group painted a birdhouse, and then it was complete. We went from being the group that started last to being the group who finished first. Conveniently, we finished right before the pandemic, so great timing. Now, before I mention projects from junior year, I want to mention two things. Yes, I am a junior right now, and yes, there might be a very memorable project upcoming, but I doubt it since I only have 1 more month of school. Secondly, I want to mention that this school year has been heavily influenced by the coronavirus pandemic. As a result, we couldn't exactly do as many projects as we should have. However, I still have 5 memorable projects from junior year that I want to mention. So the first project for 11th grade was for American history. It was a poster on the American Dream. So this is a classic project that is done every year. I obviously did it, and I thought it did a good job. Turns out I had to redo it. My teacher liked my definition of the American Dream, but he didn't like the artwork and thought it could be better. Fortunately though, the redo was good, so I did it. I made an 83 on it, but I still think I did much better than that. I'm pretty bad at art, so I'm actually quite impressed by it. Me and my American history teacher both agreed that the definition is great, though. My definition was, the American dream is equality of opportunity without discrimination. I remember on this poster, I included a white man shaking hands with a black man. I also wrote equality in 6 different languages. I was able to write it in English and Spanish easily, since I speak both of those languages. But for the rest, I had to use Google Translate, as they weren't too accurate. But overall, I thought it was great. Sucks I made only a B on it, but it was still a great project overall. For the next project of 11th grade, I'll talk about another project for American history. So this was not an art project like the American Dream project. It was actually a project where we had to basically recite the Declaration of Independence with a modern twist. Some students chose to do text messages, one even did a rap. I did a breakup letter. It was pretty good. I basically talked about why King George III is an asshole and why we are breaking from Great Britain. I made a 100 on it, and I think I deserved it. It was really fun to make, and I also better understood the Declaration of Independence, since I barely understood a thing they said in the Declaration of Independence, as it sounded like an English teacher wrote it. Oh my god, I hate English! Please make it stop! Anyways, the next project for 11th grade I want to discuss is also the last project for American history I want to mention. So we just finished talking about closing the West. You know, the era of cowboys, rangers, Mormons, Texas, and anything else related to the West. So we had to create a closing the West mural. This basically meant we had to include like 10 projects from the Union onto a poster where all of them fit into one piece. I worked very hard on this project. I believe I worked a total of like 6.5 hours on it. I thought it looked pretty good. My teacher thought the same with the 93 he gave me. My poster included a rail, along with some other Western vibing additions. Overall, I can't say too much about it, but I worked extremely hard on it, and I'm pretty satisfied with the grade. Now for the fourth project in 11th grade, I want to talk about one for English. Now my English teacher right now for American Lit was also my 9th grade English teacher. So we read a book called The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. So Pausch was a computer technology professor at Carnegie Mellon University, and he basically had the perfect life. He had a great childhood, a great job, a great wife, great kids, and great anything. But then he found out that he had pancreatic cancer when he was going to pass away in possibly the next year at only 48 years old. So therefore, he gave a last lecture to all of his students as well as many of the faculty. His book was about his last lecture and the stories throughout his life. It was a very powerful and very influential read. So this wasn't really a project, but the assignment was just so massive, I'm going to call it a project. So we basically had a packet that had questions for each chapter. Now these questions weren't asking you to spit out the information. They were actually asking you to connect and talk about your experiences. That's why I really liked this project. It was great because it actually inspired some of the future story times I plan on making. I should also note that when I finished the packet, I believe I was also going to work on Storytime 9, so I had quite a lot of experience in this matter. It was really fun, and I wish more projects were like this, as I enjoyed reflecting over myself and writing in the same attitude I do when I write my scripts for Storytime. Now for the final project from 11th grade, as well as the final project I want to talk about for this week's Storytime. So this was for chemistry. We were assigned to create a superhero or a villain related to any element on the periodic table and discuss their traits. The traits, of course, related to the elemental properties. I chose to use francium as my element, since that is my favorite element. I did a villain. His name was Jean de Francium. He was a French scientist who worked for the Soviet Union throughout the 40s and 50s, experimenting with francium in Kazakhstan in order to blow up the imperialist United States of America. It was really fun to make, and it was also really cool coming up with a villain who not only was a part of the Soviet Union, but also used the best element on the periodic table for his schemes. So that's all I got for today's story time. Next week, I'll be discussing my experience at DNOW 2021. Anyways, that's all I got for today's video, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!